Nevertheless, many have been the lets and impediments that have been cast in the way to retard and obstruct the Lord's work, by prelacy, supremacy, indulgences, toleration, and absolute tyranny and compliance therewith, enacted by law, and all the mischiefs established by a throne of iniquity since the unhappy restoration of Charles II to this day. Yet few have zealously contended, and fewer have constantly continued in contending against these obstructions, so obstructive to the cause. Many have kept secret the first motions and appearances of these things, while they might have been suppressed and overcome, and the generality have passed them over in silence, and made not known nor adverted unto the evil of these things, when declared, by witnessing against these things, when they could not be other ways removed or overcome. Yea, many of us have ourselves cast in lets and impediments, obstructing or obstructive to the cause of our defections, divisions, and disorders against common consent, and precipitances without common consent, even of our brethren adhering to the testimony. Many a divisive motion hath not been counted dangerous as those which tended to divide us from the covenanted cause, and many a good and necessary motion hath been accounted divisive, namely, such as proposed the necessity of confessing and forsaking sin. Quote, besides these and many other breaches of the articles of the covenant in the matter thereof, which concerneth every one of us to search out and acknowledge before the Lord, as we could wish his wrath to be turned away from us. So have many of us failed exceedingly in the matter of following and pursuing the duties contained therein, not only seeking great things for ourselves and mixing private interests and ends concerning ourselves and friends and followers with these things which concern the public good, but many times preferring such to the honor of God and good of his cause, and retarding God's work, until we might carry alongst with us our own interests and designs. It hath been our way to trust in the means, and to rely upon the arm of flesh for success, howbeit the Lord hath many times made us meet with disappointments, and stained the pride of all our glory, by blasting every carnal confidence unto us. We have followed for the most part the counsels of flesh and blood, and walked more by the rules of policy than piety, and have hearkened more unto men than unto God." Unquote. In the conclusion of the Solemn League and Covenant, there is a profession and declaration, quote, before God and the world, of our unfeigned desires to be humbled, a. for our own sins and for the sins of these kingdoms, Ezekiel 7 verse 16, but they that escape of them shall escape, and shall be upon the mountains like doves of the valleys, all of them mourning, every one for his iniquity. B. Especially that we have not valued, as we ought, the inestimable benefit of the gospel, Ezekiel 9 verse 4, set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and that cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. C. That we have not labored for the purity, Matthew 22 verse 5, but they made light of it and went their ways, one to his farm, another to his merchandise. D. And the power thereof, 1 Timothy 6 verse 14, that thou keep this commandment without spot, unrebukable until the appearing of our Lord Jesus Christ. E. And that we have not endeavored to receive Christ into our hearts, 2 Timothy 3 verse 5, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. F. Nor to walk worthy of him in our lives, Ephesians 3 verse 17, that Christ may dwell in your hearts by faith, Colossians 2 verse 6, as ye have therefore received Christ Jesus the Lord, so walk ye in him. G. Which are the causes of other sins and transgressions so much abounding amongst us, Colossians 1 verse 10, that ye might walk worthy of the Lord, unto all pleasing. H. All which are under many obligations to confess and mourn over from the world, and of our true and unfeigned purpose and desire to endeavor for ourselves and all others under our power and charge. 2 Thessalonians 2 verses 10, 11, and 12, because they receive not the love of the truth. For this cause God shall send them strong delusion, that they shall believe a lie, that they all might be damned who believe not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. I. Both in public and in private, in all duties. Joshua 24 verse 15, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Genesis 18 verse 19, for I know him that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord to do justice and judgment. K. We owe to God and man to amend our lives. 1 Timothy 3, verse 15, that thou mayest know how thou oughtest to behave thyself in the house of God. L. And each one to go before another. Psalm 101, verse 2, I will walk within my house with a perfect heart. Jeremiah 7, verse 3, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, Attend your ways and your doings, and I will cause you to dwell in this place. And Isaiah 1, verses 16 and 17, Cease to do evil, learn to do well. M. In the example of a real reformation, that the Lord might turn away his wrath and heavy indignation. Jeremiah 50, verse 8, Remove out of the midst of Babylon, and go forth out of the land of the Chaldeans, and be ye as the he-goats before the flocks. N. And establish these kingdoms in truth and peace. Zechariah 1, verse 3, Turn ye unto me, saith the Lord of hosts, and I will turn unto you, saith the Lord of hosts. Psalm 85, verse 3, Thou hast taken away all thy wrath. Thou hast turned thyself from the fierceness of thine anger. Verse 4, Turn us, O God of our salvation, and cause thine anger towards us to cease. O. Yet we have refused to be reformed, and have walked proudly and obstinately before the Lord, not valuing his gospel, nor submitting ourselves unto the obedience thereof, not seeking after Christ, nor studying to honor him in the excellency of his person, nor to employ him in the virtue of his offices, not making conscience of the public ordinances, nor studying to edify one another in love. Psalm 85, verses 9 and 10, Surely his salvation is nigh them that fear him, that glory may dwell in our land. Mercy and truth have met each other, righteousness and peace have kissed each other. Isaiah 32, verse 17, And the work of righteousness shall be peace, and the effect of righteousness quietness and assurance forever. Zechariah 8, verse 19, Therefore love the truth and peace. The ignorance of God and his Son Jesus Christ prevails exceedingly in the land. Unquote. Even our fathers in their purest times confessed in their Acknowledgement of Sins, quote, that the greatest part of masters of families amongst noblemen, barons, gentlemen, burgesses, and commons neglected to seek God in their families, and to endeavor the reformation thereof. And albeit it had been much pressed, yet few of the nobles and great ones could be persuaded to perform family duties themselves in their own persons, which made so necessary a duty to misregard by persons of inferior rank. Unquote. We may add, in our degenerate times, not only the great ones generally profess the neglect and contempt of so necessary a duty, but in their own persons and in the use of chaplains, but the great part of the commons are altogether strangers to it, many performing no part of family worship at all, others only singing a psalm and reading a chapter without praying, and others making a fashion of all, but very perfunctoriously, formally, and indifferently, and scarce once in a day. And ministers also making little conscience of visiting families to see how this duty is performed, not pressing it upon the negligent, nor stirring up the formal to a more spiritual way of performance of it, nay, some giving bad example to their flocks by neglecting it themselves in their own families. The nobility, gentry, and barons, who should be examples of sober walking unto others, are very generally ringleaders of excess and rioting. We have been far from amending our lives and promoting a personal reformation, and going before one another in the example of a real reformation, when we have been examples of deformation in our personal practices and public transactions, and being too familiar and too far unite with the patrons and patterns of the land's deformations. Quote, Our fathers also acknowledge, albeit they were the Lord's people engaged unto him in a solemn way, yet they had not made it their study that judicatories and armies should consist of, and places of power and trust be filled with, men of blameless and Christian conversation, and of known integrity and approved fidelity, affection, and zeal unto the cause of God. And not only these who were neutral and indifferent, but disaffected and malignant, and others who were profane and scandalous were entrusted. By which it came to pass that judicatories even then were the seats of injustice and iniquity, and many in their armies by miscarriages became their plague, unto the great prejudice of the cause of God, the great scandal of the gospel, and the great increase of looseness and profanity throughout all the land. Unquote. But since the time of that acknowledgement, there has still been more and more degeneracy, so that judicatories have consisted of and been filled with perjured traitors to God and their country, and armies made up of these plagues marshaled under a displayed banner against Christ and his interest, not only to the scandal, but for the suppression of the gospel, and forcing people to profanity throughout the land, and now are to the disgrace of the Protestant religion, made up of the refuse of the lands, and employed to the support of an anti-Christian interest abroad. Yet have we not sighed and cried for these abominations, nor have we been concerned as we ought with the abounding of them through the land, as also with blushing we must confess our pride and presumptuous boasting of external privileges of the gospel, and outward reformation, and of a testimony which we bragged of, as if that had made us better than others, while we made no conscience of personal reformation, which, no doubt amongst other sinful miscarriages, was a main cause of the Lord's depriving us so long a time of the comfortable and soul-enriching mercy of a faithful, dispensed gospel. Quote, and in like manner, the conceitedness of some in suffering and contending for truth, rather for keeping up the contention and abetting a party, and many times under too lofty names of the suffering party and remnant and the like, that to keep and hold fast the word of the Lord's patience and glory as our crown, and many other evidences of pride, hateful to God, such as boasting in the strength of armies in the suffering times, in an ostensive way vaunting of, and being too much taken up with them, though then necessary for the defense of our lives, rejoicing in our numerousness or worldly abilities, or in the number of them that frequent the public ordinances in the fields, or that they who are owners of the testimony are for the most part kept free from the gross outbreaking into which others are left to fall, which things, though very good and desirable in themselves, yet may be and have been occasions of sin when boasted in, more than humbly and thankfully acknowledged to be from the hand of God. Unquote. As also revengeful resenting of affronts, passionate and disdainful refusing to take reproofs for faults, or for the excess in any duty as to the manner of it when we thought the matter was right. Quote, and it is likewise matter of regret, that both in the time of greatest suffering and afterwards, idleness of both kinds did much prevail amongst us, both that when we were in a manner driven from the world, and shut up from all employments, but the exercise of godliness, many did not improve that opportunity of the cross to promote acquaintance and communion with God, being slothful in prayer, reading, and other duties, and some again, even when they might have had access to lawful employments, continued idle and out of work, to the opening of the mouths of many against the cause, albeit they were not called to or employed in any public business for the same. Unquote. And besides all these things, there be many other transgressions whereof the lands wherein we live are guilty, and these attended with many heinous aggravating circumstances beyond what they were in our fathers, which we have not been humbled for to this day. But instead of mourning for them, confessing and forsaking them, we have been rather defending or daubing, covering or coloring, excusing or extenuating them. All which we now desire to acknowledge and be humbled for, that the world may bear witness with us, that righteousness belongeth unto God, and shame and confusion of face to us, as appears this day.